You think Christmas dinner was always honey-glazed ham and store-bought rolls? Think again. Our grandparents filled holiday tables with dishes so rich in tradition that modern celebrations can't compare, recipes now fading from memory. Let's dig into 60 forgotten Christmas dinners only your grandparents knew. Chitterlings simmered for hours on Christmas Eve in homes where every part of the hog found purpose. The intestines cleaned and cooked until tender enough to eat. The preparation was labor-intensive. The chitlins required thorough cleaning and multiple rinses before they could be boiled with onions, vinegar, and seasonings. The smell was distinctive and polarizing, announcing to the neighborhood that a family was preparing traditional soul food. After hours of cooking, the chitlins became tender and flavorful, served with hot sauce and accompanied by cornbread and greens. Families who grew up eating chitterlings considered them a delicacy, while others couldn't get past the idea of eating intestines. The dish represented African-American culinary tradition, the transformation of discarded parts into cherished holiday food. Chitterlings connected generations through taste and memory, each batch carrying forward the knowledge of ancestors who had survived on such humble fare. Souse meat with crackers was Christmas appetizer that transformed pork scraps into delicacy through careful preparation. The souse was made from pig heads, feet, and ears boiled until tender, then chopped fine and bound with gelatin from bones. Vinegar, onions, and spices were added before pressing mixture into loaf pans to set. By Christmas, the souse sliced clean, its texture firm and slightly gelatinous, its flavor tangy and rich. Served cold with saltine crackers, this was Christmas snacking that represented complete hog utilization. In mountain communities, souse meant respect for animals and refusal to waste anything. The vinegar preserved meat while adding brightness that cut through richness. Children learned to appreciate souse as grown-up food, its complex flavors marking passage into adult tastes. This was Christmas tradition born from necessity, proving that the finest cooking often came from using everything and wasting nothing. Jellied cranberry mold was the shimmering ruby centerpiece that wiggled its way onto holiday tables, its rings and fluted shapes announcing Christmas had arrived. Cranberry juice was combined with gelatin, sugar, and sometimes chopped celery, walnuts, or orange zest before being poured into decorative molds and chilled until firm. Unmolding required skill and courage, a moment of tension as the gelatin released from its container onto the serving platter. The most elaborate molds created rings, stars, or Christmas tree shapes that drew admiration before the first slice was cut. The flavor was tart-sweet, the texture somewhere between firm and wobbly that either delighted or disturbed guests. Families served cranberry mold alongside turkey and stuffing, its bright color providing contrast to brown and beige. The canned cranberry sauce that replaced it never achieved the same festive presentation. Jellied molds of all kinds have disappeared from modern tables, taking with them an era when presentation required skill and patience. Oxtail stew simmered for hours on Christmas Eve, transforming the cheapest cuts from the butcher into rich, gelatinous luxury that rivaled any expensive roast. Butchers practically gave away oxtails, considering them scraps fit only for those who couldn't afford better. But patient cooks knew the secret. Those bony sections contained collagen that melted into silky richness when braised low and slow. The tails were browned in batches, then returned to heavy pots with onions, carrots, turnips, and whatever root vegetables the cellar still held. Hours of gentle simmering transformed tough meat into fork-tender strands, surrounded by gravy thick enough to coat a spoon. The marrow melted into the liquid, adding depth that no other cut could provide. Families gathered around steaming bowls, using bread to capture every drop. Oxtail stew represented the wisdom of slow cooking, the understanding that time and heat could elevate even the humblest ingredients. Sorghum gingerbread was Christmas dessert that captured dark sweetness of mountain agriculture. Sorghum syrup, made from cane grown and processed locally, replaced expensive molasses in gingerbread recipes. The result was cake that was moist, dark, and intensely spiced with ginger, cinnamon, and cloves. Baked in cast iron and served warm, it filled houses with Christmas smells that drifted through hollows. In rural communities, Sorghum gingerbread meant Christmas sweetness that didn't require store-bought ingredients, since families often made their own sorghum. The cake was dense and rich, its crumb tight from sorghum's weight. Served with butter or whipped cream when available, plain when not, it satisfied sweet cravings during lean times. This represented mountain resourcefulness, creating celebration desserts from crops grown and processed locally, proving Christmas joy came from land and labor rather than stores and money. Let's dig into 30 Christmas dinners from those decades that have completely disappeared. Crown roast of pork was the showstopper centerpiece that announced a family's prosperity and a mother's skill the moment guests entered the dining room. Butchers would French the rib bones and curve them into a majestic crown shape, each bone tip adorned with a paper frill that made the roast look almost too elegant to eat. The center was filled with savory stuffing, often bread-based with apples, onions, and sage, that cooked inside the meat, absorbing all those rich pork juices. Families ordered these roasts weeks in advance from local butchers who knew exactly how to prepare them. The presentation was theatrical, carried to the table on the best silver platter while everyone gasped and applauded. Carving required precision, with the host carefully separating each chop while keeping the crown intact as long as possible. The meat was succulent, the stuffing rich, and the experience unforgettable. Crown roast represented an era when Christmas dinner was performance as much as meal, when presentation mattered deeply. Hoppin' John carried good luck wishes into Christmas dinner across the South, the combination of black-eyed peas and rice symbolizing coins and prosperity for the coming year. The dish cost almost nothing to prepare. Dried peas soaked overnight, rice bought in bulk, and whatever pork scraps the kitchen held. A ham hock or piece of fatback simmered with the peas, infusing them with smoky richness while the rice cooked separately. The two were combined on plates, the peas spooned over fluffy rice and topped with cooking liquid that had become thick and flavorful. Families ate Hoppin' John believing it would bring fortune, the superstition adding meaning to a meal that poverty might otherwise have made shameful. Children were taught to eat every pea on their plate to ensure the luck would stick. Hoppin' John represented hope dressed as dinner, the belief that better times lay ahead even when the present offered only beans and rice. Christmas snow salad was the kind of festive chilled dish that Betty Crocker promoted when families loved adding creamy sweet salads to their holiday tables. It was made from whipped cream pineapple marshmallows and sometimes nuts folded together until the mixture resembled soft winter snow piled into a glass bowl. The salad sat in the refrigerator for hours where it firmed slightly, becoming cool and airy with every ingredient suspended in a cloud-like mixture. On Christmas Day, it was spooned onto plates beside ham or turkey, adding a bright sweet contrast to the savory dishes. Children loved its softness while adults appreciated its novelty and gentle sweetness, especially in an era when holiday meals often featured both savory and dessert. Like sides, Christmas snow salad was more than a dish, it was a moment of whimsy on an otherwise heavy winter table. Its white color mirrored the season and made every plate look more cheerful. Over time, tastes shifted and the idea of sweet salads faded from Christmas menus, leaving recipes like this tucked inside old holiday cookbooks. Yet for grandparents, it represented a style of entertaining where joy was found in simple ingredients whipped into something that felt magical. It was a taste of mid-century Christmases when creativity, warmth, and a bit of playful indulgence defined the holiday meal. Pickled pig's feet were Christmas delicacy, transforming butchering scraps into something prized. When families butchered hogs in December, nothing was wasted, especially feet becoming treats after preparation. The feet were cleaned meticulously, boiled tender with bay leaves and peppercorns, then packed into stone crocks and covered with spiced vinegar heated with garlic and pepper. They cured for weeks, vinegar penetrating meat and softening cartilage until everything became tender and tangy. Served cold on Christmas morning, pickled feet were eaten with fingers, meat falling off bones while gelatinous texture melted on tongues. In rural communities throughout the South, these represented thrift elevated to tradition, using every part of hog and creating something delicious. Children learned to appreciate pickled feet as treats, not scraps. The vinegary tang cut through rich holiday meals. This proved mountain cooking was about transforming everything into something worth celebrating. Charlotte Russe was the elegant Christmas dessert that arrived in individual servings, each one a small tower of Bavarian cream surrounded by ladyfingers and topped with whipped cream. The dessert required patience and skill. The cream filling had to be made from scratch, cooked custard folded with whipped cream and set with gelatin until it held its shape. Ladyfingers were arranged around the inside of molds, standing upright like soldiers guarding the creamy center. Once unmolded, the charlottes looked like something from a French pastry shop, impossibly refined for home kitchens. Families served them at Christmas dinner parties where impressing guests mattered. The cream was delicate, barely sweet, flavored with vanilla or sometimes a splash of rum. Each spoonful combined the soft cookie texture of ladyfingers with the airy richness of the filling. Charlotte Russe represented the height of homemade elegance, proof that American cooks could match European sophistication when the occasion demanded their finest efforts. Beef Wellington was the ultimate expression of holiday extravagance, wrapping prime beef tenderloin in mushroom duxelles and flaky puff pastry. The preparation took hours, searing the beef, cooking down finely chopped mushrooms until they were practically dry, wrapping everything in pastry and chilling until firm. Timing the bake was crucial. The pastry needed to turn golden while the beef inside stayed perfectly pink. Slicing revealed beautiful cross-sections of meat encased in mushroom and pastry that made guests audibly gasp. This was company food, reserved for Christmas Eve dinners when important guests were coming or when families wanted to prove their sophistication. The dish required expensive ingredients and considerable skill, making it a status symbol as much as a meal. Beef Wellington represented the aspirational cooking of the era, when home cooks attempted restaurant-quality dishes to impress. It has largely vanished from home kitchens, relegated to expensive steakhouses where few experience its former glory. Fig preserves cake was born in the rural South, where fig trees were common and nothing went to waste. Housewives gathered ripe figs at the end of summer, boiled them down into thick preserves, and saved them for special occasions, especially Christmas. The cake was heavy, dark, and sweet, flavored with spice and syrup, and brushed with more preserves after baking for shine. Each slice tasted like the memory of warm sunlight carried into winter. It was more than dessert. It was the story of Southern thrift and generosity, of families who made something grand from what they had. The batter came together slowly, stirred by hand in chipped ceramic bowls, while the scent of molasses and cinnamon filled the room. When the first bite met your tongue, it was soft and earthy, with a sweetness that deepened as it cooled. People brought it to church socials, wrapped in wax paper, as both offering and pride. For many families, this was the closest thing to fruitcake they could afford, and it quickly became a holiday tradition. The figs gave moisture, the spices gave warmth, and the love gave meaning. Today, it is a rare sight, forgotten among simpler sweets. But in its day, fig cake was proof that homegrown ingredients could taste as rich as anything from a bakery. Rabbit gravy over rice was Christmas dinner that stretched small game into meal feeding many. The rabbits were jointed and browned, then simmered until tender in broth thickened with flour into rich gravy. Served over white rice, this created complete meal that was economical and deeply satisfying. In mountain communities, rabbit gravy represented resourcefulness, turning 2 or 3 small rabbits into dinner for 10 or more people. The gravy was savory and rich, flavored with wild onions and black pepper. Rice stretched the meal further, soaking up every drop of gravy while providing filling carbohydrates. This was Christmas dinner born from necessity but elevated through care and proper technique. The rabbit meat was tender and mild, the gravy thick and comforting. Families gathered around steaming bowls, understanding that celebration came from making the most of what you had, transforming scarcity into sufficiency through skill and tradition passed through generations of mountain cooks. Bread pudding with hard sauce transformed stale bread into Christmas luxury, the dried loaves soaked in sweetened milk and eggs until they became something entirely new. Families saved bread heels and dried slices for weeks, knowing they'd find purpose in holiday pudding. The bread was torn and soaked until saturated, then mixed with sugar, vanilla, spices, and beaten eggs before baking until puffed and golden. Raisins or dried apples added sweetness when available. The hard sauce made the dish special, butter beaten with sugar and a splash of whiskey until fluffy. Warm pudding topped with cold hard sauce created temperature contrast that elevated humble ingredients into something approaching elegant. Children received smaller portions of the whiskey-laced sauce, while adults appreciated its warming qualities. Bread pudding represented transformation, the alchemical process of turning yesterday's scraps into tomorrow's celebration. Nothing was wasted when stale bread became dessert. Persimmon pudding with hard sauce was Christmas dessert that captured wild sweetness of mountain autumn. Persimmons had to be gathered after first frost when they became soft and intensely sweet, their astringency gone. The fruit was pressed through sieves to create smooth pulp mixed with flour, eggs, milk, spices, and molasses. Baked slowly, the pudding emerged dark and dense, its texture somewhere between cake and custard. Hard sauce, butter and sugar beaten until fluffy, flavored with vanilla or whiskey, melted over warm pudding, creating rich contrast. In mountain communities, persimmon pudding represented patience and knowledge, knowing when persimmons were ready, understanding how to preserve their flavor. The pudding was deeply spiced with cinnamon and nutmeg, its persimmon sweetness unlike anything else. This was Christmas dessert that couldn't be rushed or bought, requiring understanding of seasons and willingness to wait for nature's timing. Sweet potato soufflé was the showstopper that made guests gasp when it emerged from the oven, puffed high and golden like an edible cloud. Unlike dense casseroles, the soufflé required whipping potatoes with eggs separated carefully, yolks beaten into warm puree, whites whipped stiff and folded in at the last moment. The mixture was seasoned with cinnamon, nutmeg, and vanilla, sweetened with brown sugar, and sometimes enriched with bourbon. Baked in a straight-sided dish, it would rise dramatically, its top browning while the interior stayed impossibly light. Timing was everything. The soufflé had to travel from oven to table immediately before it could deflate. Children pressed their faces to oven doors, watching the miraculous rise with wonder. The texture was unlike anything else, simultaneously creamy and ethereal, sweet but not cloying. Sweet potato soufflé represented kitchen ambition, a willingness to attempt something difficult for the reward of witnessing that collective intake of breath around the table. Aspic molds were the savory gelatin creations that showcased ingredients suspended in shimmering jewel-toned towers of concentrated flavor. Clarified consommé or tomato juice was combined with gelatin, then poured over carefully arranged vegetables, hard-boiled eggs, or shrimp before chilling until firm. The presentation was everything. Unmolded aspics revealed their contents like treasures in amber, the vegetables and proteins visible through the transparent or translucent gel. Making aspic required understanding gelatin chemistry and having the patience to layer ingredients properly. The texture was unusual, the savory gelatin coating the tongue before releasing its flavors. Families served aspic as a first course or side dish, its impressive appearance justifying the effort. By the 1980s, aspic had become punchline shorthand for outdated cooking. Yet for decades it represented culinary ambition and skill. Aspic has completely disappeared from home cooking, remembered only in vintage cookbooks and mid-century nostalgia. Tomato aspic ring was a savory gelatin dish that once appeared in nearly every Betty Crocker holiday spread, even though today most people cannot imagine eating tomato juice suspended in a mold. Your grandparents knew it as a classic cold salad presented in bright red rings filled with crisp lettuce, celery, or cucumber in the center. It was elegant by mid-century standards, a way to show skill and modern taste when gelatin molds were considered the height of home entertaining. The mixture combined seasoned tomato liquid, gelatin, Worcestershire, and sometimes chopped vegetables, then chilled until firm enough to slice. The aspic was served alongside turkey ham or roast, making it a refreshing counterbalance to heavy foods. It looked dramatic on a table, especially when unmolded onto a polished platter shaped perfectly smooth and glistening under holiday lights. Time changed the expectations of Christmas menus, and with that change, tomato aspic faded quietly from homes replaced by fresher, lighter dishes. But for families who remember it, the aspic was a sign of tradition, care and pride in presenting something beautiful even when ingredients were humble. It carried the spirit of a hostess who wanted her table to look as joyful as the season itself. Pickled pig's feet sat in jars on Christmas tables as appetizers and accompaniments, the preserved feet providing protein and gelatin that had been prepared weeks earlier. The feet were cleaned, boiled until tender, then packed into jars with vinegar, spices, and onions that preserved and flavored them simultaneously. The pickling liquid turned slightly gelatinous from collagen released during cooking, and the meat became tangy and tender. Families served pickled pig's feet cold, the meat pulled from bones and eaten with fingers or forks. The dish was economical. Feet cost almost nothing at the butcher, and the preservation meant it could be prepared well ahead of the holiday rush. Children either loved or avoided the strange texture, while adults appreciated both the flavor and the tradition. Pickled pig's feet represented the practical wisdom of preparing ahead, using preservation to transform cheap cuts into Christmas delicacies. Raisin Spice Drop cookies were the soft, warmly spiced holiday treats found in early Betty Crocker books, the kind baked by the dozens for school events, church gatherings, and family tins. Made from butter sugar flour, raisins, and warm spices, these cookies puffed gently as they baked, creating soft, pillowy centers that tasted like cinnamon-filled winter air. Their scent filled the kitchen and drifted down hallways, making the whole house smell like Christmas. Families baked large batches to share with neighbors and friends, continuing the old tradition of gifting homemade sweets during the holiday season. Though modern cookie trends have grown more elaborate, there is something enduring about these humble raisin-studded drops that speaks to a simpler time. Each batch felt like an act of care, and every warm cookie handed out felt like a small holiday kindness offered from one home to another. Blackberry jam cake was Christmas dessert, carrying summer's wild harvest into winter celebration. This wasn't ordinary cake, but dense creation, darkened with blackberry jam stirred into batter. The jam came from wild berries picked along fence rows in July, cooked with sugar and preserved. Come Christmas, jam transformed into cake moisture and flavor, tart, sweet, purple. The batter was spiced with cinnamon, cloves, and nutmeg, creating warmth, complementing berry brightness. Baked in cast iron, the cake emerged dark and fragrant, its crumb tight from jam. Some families added caramel icing, others served plain. In mountain communities, blackberry jam cake represented foresight and connection to land, picking berries in summer for Christmas months away. Children remembered helping pick berries, fingers stained purple. Understanding this work would become December dessert. The cake sliced thick, each piece carrying memories of summer foraging. Caramel corn clusters were the gift of laughter wrapped in paper bags. Each batch started with freshly popped corn and a pot of bubbling caramel that coated every piece in golden sweetness. Families made them in large tins, stirring until their arms ached and the kitchen smelled like a dream. Once cooled, the caramel corn was pressed into clusters and tied with string to be given as gifts or shared after church. The sound of kernels crackling and the sight of sticky fingers were part of the ritual. It was cheap to make, easy to share, and impossible to forget. Caramel corn clusters turned ordinary popcorn into something festive and full of love. Each bite was crisp, buttery, and comforting, like joy you could taste. They have mostly disappeared now, replaced by boxed sweets and factory-made gifts. But back then, they were worth more than anything money could buy. Cranberry conserve was the Christmas condiment that elevated turkey and ham beyond ordinary fare. A chunky preserve combining fresh cranberries with orange, nuts, and sometimes raisins. Unlike simple cranberry sauce from a can, conserve required cooking whole berries with sugar until they burst, then folding in orange zest, chopped walnuts, and diced apple for texture. The mixture was thick enough to hold its shape yet spreadable for biscuits. Families made conserve in large batches before Christmas, filling mason jars for gifts and storage. The flavor balanced tart cranberries with sweet orange and earthy walnuts, each spoonful offering different textures. Grandmothers served conserve in cut glass dishes, the deep ruby color glowing like jewels on the holiday table. The tradition transformed a simple berry into something worthy of celebration. Though cranberry sauce remains popular, the richer conserve has largely disappeared from modern tables. Plum pudding with hard sauce was the English tradition that concluded Christmas dinner with theatrical flames and boozy richness. The pudding itself was made weeks in advance, a dense mixture of sweet, dried fruits, spices, and breadcrumbs that aged until the flavors melded into something complex and deeply satisfying. On Christmas Day, the pudding was steamed for hours, then turned onto a platter and doused with brandy that was set alight, the blue flames dancing across its dark surface while guests applauded. Hard sauce, butter creamed with powdered sugar and more brandy, melted over hot slices, adding richness to every bite. Finding the hidden coin or charm baked inside brought luck to the finder. Families with English roots maintained this tradition for generations, the pudding recipe handed down carefully. The labor required and changing tastes that favored lighter desserts eventually ended the tradition for most families. Plum pudding represented a Christmas that demanded effort and rewarded patience. Chestnut soup with bacon was Christmas' first course that captured forest bounty and smokehouse richness. Wild chestnuts gathered in fall were roasted, peeled, and simmered until soft enough to puree. The resulting soup was thickened with cream when available, or milk when not, creating velvety texture. Crispy bacon crumbled on top added saltiness and crunch that complemented chestnut sweetness. In Appalachian communities, chestnut soup represented Christmas before the blight destroyed American chestnuts, marking this as truly forgotten food. The soup was elegant despite humble ingredients, its nutty sweetness unlike anything modern. Served hot in bowls, it warmed bodies preparing for larger Christmas meal to follow. The bacon provided savory contrast while adding necessary fat. This was mountain sophistication, wild food prepared with technique that created restaurant-quality results, proving rural cooks understood refinement even when cooking from forest and farm. Old-fashioned fruitcake loaf was one of Betty Crocker's most persistent holiday recommendations, a dense loaf packed with candied fruit nut spices and warm winter aroma. It was mixed, slowly baked carefully, and cooled fully before slicing, sometimes wrapped and stored for days to deepen the flavor. For many families, it became a gifting tradition because the loaf traveled well and symbolized care and effort. The colors of red, green, and gold fruit pieces made each slice look festive, even if the flavor was richer than modern tastes prefer. Fruitcake slowly faded from popularity, but older generations remembered its place on Christmas tables and its importance in holiday sharing. In Betty Crocker's cookbooks, it stood as a symbol of patience, tradition, and the belief that some desserts were meant to last beyond a single day. Infinity wreaths were the kind of candy that felt almost too pretty to eat. Made from whipped sugar syrup and egg whites tinted a soft pink, they were piped into delicate circles and topped with bits of candied cherry to look like miniature wreaths. They dried to a crisp shell, glossy and perfect, the kind of treat meant to impress at church bake sales and family parties. Housewives of the 1950s prided themselves on these: the precision, the patience, the artistry. Every wreath was a little labor of love that demanded steady hands and careful timing. They were arranged on plates or strung with ribbon for decoration, part candy, part craft. Today's confections might be flashier, but few carry the charm of these pastel creations. They represented an age when food doubled as festivity, when every bite was shaped to bring beauty and joy to the table. Cherry pineapple gelatin mold was one of the bright jewel-toned centerpieces found on mid-century Christmas tables, built from gelatin canned fruit and decorative molds. The mixture set into a scalloped ring that held cherries and pineapple pieces suspended like stained glass. It brought color to winter meals and added a sweet chilled side dish to balance heavier foods. This mold reflected a time when appearance was as important as flavor, and holiday tables were dressed in vivid colors. Eventually, gelatin salads faded from style, but this dish remains iconic within vintage Betty Crocker collections. It recalled an era when hospitality meant crafting something eye-catching even with inexpensive ingredients, and when molded salads were considered the height of festive creativity. The shimmer of fruit beneath the surface made every table look a little more cheerful. Molasses taffy pull was Christmas entertainment and dessert combined into one sticky, sweet tradition. Molasses was boiled with sugar until it reached hard ball stage, then poured onto buttered platters to cool slightly. Families gathered with buttered hands, pulling the taffy until it turned from dark brown to golden and became firm. The pulling was a social event, children and adults working together, laughing as the candy stretched and folded. The finished taffy was cut into pieces and wrapped, becoming Christmas treats that lasted through winter. In rural communities, taffy pull meant Christmas fun that cost almost nothing but created memories lasting lifetimes. The candy was chewy and intensely sweet, its molasses flavor marking it as mountain treat. This represented Christmas joy created through community effort, proving best celebrations came from working and laughing together, transforming simple ingredients into sweetness through shared labor and tradition. Persimmon pudding was the Christmas dessert that depended entirely on finding perfectly ripe wild persimmons, a fruit that rewarded patience but punished impatience with mouth-puckering astringency. Families in the Midwest and South knew to wait until after the first hard frost, when persimmons softened into orange globes of concentrated sweetness. The pulp was pushed through sieves to remove seeds and skin, creating a thick puree that gave the pudding its distinctive flavor, somewhere between dates and honey with hints of cinnamon. The batter was simple: persimmon pulp mixed with flour, sugar, eggs, butter, and spices, then baked until set and deeply caramelized. The texture was dense and sticky, almost like fudge, demanding to be eaten warm with hard sauce or whipped cream. Persimmon pudding appeared only at Christmas because that was when the fruit ripened. Families who knew good persimmon trees guarded them jealously. The dessert connected people to the land and seasons in ways modern cooking rarely does. Duchess potatoes were the piped golden rosettes that turned simple mashed potatoes into elegant garnish worthy of the finest Christmas roasts. Potatoes were riced until perfectly smooth, enriched with butter, egg yolks, and cream, then piped through pastry bags into decorative swirls on baking sheets. A brush of egg wash before baking created golden, crispy exteriors while the insides stayed creamy. The presentation was stunning. Each rosette a perfect spiral that looked far more difficult than it was. Families arranged Duchess potatoes around roasts or served them as individual portions that made guests feel specially treated. The technique required a steady hand and proper consistency. Too wet, and the potatoes wouldn't hold their shape. Too dry, and they cracked. Duchess potatoes represented the era's embrace of French technique in home cooking. They have largely disappeared, replaced by simpler preparations that don't require piping bags or the patience to create individual portions. Molasses cake emerged from ovens on Christmas morning in homes where refined sugar was too expensive, the dark sweetener providing depth of flavor that white sugar couldn't match. Flour, molasses, eggs, and spices were beaten together and baked until the cake rose and set, its surface dark and fragrant with the smell of ginger and warm spices. The flavor was complex, sweet but with bitter undertones, spicy from ginger and cinnamon that enhanced the molasses rather than competing with it. The cake was served plain or with a simple glaze, its dense texture satisfying in ways that lighter cakes couldn't be. Molasses was affordable because it was a byproduct of sugar refining, making it the sweetener poor families relied on throughout the year. The cake could be baked ahead and stored, improving with age as the flavors melded together. Molasses cake represented making virtue of necessity, discovering that cheaper ingredients could produce results as satisfying as expensive ones. Cheese balls were the centerpiece of holiday appetizer tables, their nut-crusted spheres surrounded by crackers and eager guests with spreading knives. Cream cheese was blended with sharp cheddar, Worcestershire sauce, and seasonings, then shaped into balls and rolled in chopped pecans or walnuts. The mixture was chilled until firm, the nuts providing crunch against the creamy interior. Some hostesses shaped their cheese into logs or pressed it into decorative molds for variety. Cheese balls appeared at every holiday gathering, their presence as expected as the Christmas tree. Making them was simple enough for beginners, but impressive enough to earn compliments. The flavor was sharp and savory, the texture smooth and spreadable. Guests would gather around, spreading cheese on crackers while catching up on the year's news. Cheese balls have faded from prominence, replaced by artisanal cheese boards that seem more sophisticated but lack the nostalgic charm of their predecessor. Fried catfish with hush puppies was Christmas Eve tradition in communities near rivers and creeks. The catfish were caught through holes in December ice or from cold but unfrozen streams, their white flesh firm and sweet. Coated in seasoned cornmeal and fried until golden, the fish developed crackling crust while staying moist inside. Hush puppies, cornmeal fritters mixed with onions, fried alongside, creating complete meal. In rural communities along southern waterways, catfish Christmas Eve meant abundant local protein requiring only skill and patience to catch. The tradition often included whole community fish fries where neighbors gathered. The catfish was mild and flaky, the hush puppies crispy and slightly sweet. Served with coleslaw and hot sauce, this was Christmas celebration built on what rivers provided freely, proving holiday feasts didn't require expensive ingredients when you had knowledge, skill, and waters full of fish waiting for those patient enough to catch them. Swedish tea ring was the warm, fragrant holiday breakfast pastry that filled mid-century kitchens on Christmas morning thanks to its placement in Betty Crocker's festive baking guides. The ring began as a rich yeast dough rolled out and spread with cinnamon sugar butter and chopped nuts before being shaped into a circle and sliced partway through to create its distinctive twisted pattern. As it baked, the layers puffed into golden spirals, each one scented with spice and sweetness, drifting through the house like a holiday invitation. Families gathered around the table to tear off pieces while the ring was still warm, letting the sticky filling cling to their fingers and plates. It was both a breakfast and a celebration, an edible centerpiece meant to welcome the day with comfort and joy. The Swedish tea ring symbolized the idea that holiday mornings deserved something homemade and special even when money or time was limited. Once beloved in households across the country, it slowly disappeared as store-bought pastries replaced the ritual of rising early to bake. But the memory of that warm, ring-shaped pastry remains part of the old Betty Crocker Christmas spirit where traditions were built from dough sugar and shared moments around the kitchen table. Ambrosia salad was the jewel of Southern Christmas tables, a shimmering bowl of citrus, coconut, and cream that felt like sunshine in winter. Sliced oranges, pineapple, and cherries were folded into whipped cream or sour cream layered with shredded coconut until it glowed. Every family had its own version. Some added marshmallows, others used gelatin, but all believed it brought brightness to the meal. Ambrosia was about celebration, abundance, and the joy of sharing. It was one of those dishes that looked too pretty to eat, its colors gleaming like stained glass under the dining room lights. Children would sneak spoonfuls before dinner, their fingers sticky with cream and sugar. Served in cut glass bowls, it stood proudly beside the turkey and ham, proof that fruit could feel like a feast. The recipe crossed generations, carrying whispers of grandmother's kitchens and Sunday suppers long past. Over time, it faded into nostalgia, dismissed as old-fashioned, but its spirit still lingers in every creamy fruit salad that comes after. It was sweet, tangy, and a little bit sentimental, just like Christmas itself. In its humble mix of flavors was a reminder that joy often hides in the simplest of bowls. Cranberry bread pudding was the thrifty warm dessert families made when leftover bread met cans or jars of cranberry sauce in the days after Christmas. The bread soaked up milk eggs, sugar and spices transforming into a custard-like base that baked into soft, comforting layers. Cranberry swirls added tart sweetness throughout, making each bite feel festive. Served warm with cream or butter, it was a dessert rooted in resourcefulness and holiday flavor. It captured the Betty Crocker belief that nothing should go to waste and that simple ingredients could bring deep comfort. The pudding filled kitchens with a gentle, spicy aroma that made even quiet winter evenings feel special, and it offered a way to turn scraps into something loved rather than forgotten. Grandparents remembered it as a dessert that made the season last just a little longer. Watergate salad appeared on holiday tables throughout the 1970s, its pale green color and mysterious origins making it a conversation piece at every gathering. Named after the scandal, though no one knew why, this dish combined instant pistachio pudding with crushed pineapple, miniature marshmallows, chopped pecans, and whipped topping folded into fluffy sweetness. Preparation took minutes, making it a favorite of busy hostesses needing impressive results without labor. The pistachio pudding gave it that distinctive mint green hue that looked festive against red tablecloths. Children adored its candy-like sweetness and surprise of crunchy nuts amid the creamy base. The dish straddled the line between salad and dessert, often appearing alongside savory dishes, though it could have ended any meal. Watergate salad represented the era's embrace of convenience products transformed into something special. Today, it survives mainly in church cookbooks and memories of those who grew up spooning seconds onto full plates. Stack cake with dried apple filling was Christmas dessert requiring community cooperation and weeks of preparation. This wasn't ordinary cake, but thin layers stacked with dried apple filling, creating towering centerpiece feeding dozens. Women began drying apples in late summer, slicing thin and laying on screens until leathery. Come Christmas, apples were rehydrated and cooked with molasses and cinnamon until thick. The cake layers were simple: flour, lard, molasses, spices, rolled thin and baked separately. Assembly was ceremony, each layer placed and spread with apple mixture. The cake sat for days, letting flavors meld into something slicing clean and tasting like autumn. In mountain communities, stack cake represented cooperation because neighbors often brought layers to celebrations. The finished cake stood tall, dark layers visible through golden apple filling. This represented mountain Christmas, patient, cooperative, deeply satisfying. Eggnog pie was a silky, golden dream poured into a flaky crust, carrying all the warmth of Christmas in every spoonful. It began as a clever way to stretch leftover eggnog into something new, but soon it became a holiday classic in its own right. The filling was rich with nutmeg, rum extract, and creamy custard, baked until just set and chilled until smooth. It was the kind of dessert that did not shout for attention. It simply waited quietly to be remembered. Families would top it with whipped cream or dust it with spice before serving it after long dinners filled with laughter. Eggnog pie was more than just dessert. It was the final note of harmony at the end of a perfect day. Its soft sweetness lingered, echoing the songs on the radio and the faint glow of tree lights through frosted windows. In a world that moves too fast now, there's something deeply comforting about a pie that asks you to slow down and taste the season. Date nut bread rings were one of the most beloved mid-century holiday hostess staples, shaped in ring molds and served with smooth cream cheese or butter. Betty Crocker encouraged home bakers to use them for Christmas open houses because they were easy to slice, easy to serve, and visually stunning. The bread itself combined chopped dates, nuts, flour, eggs, and sugar into a dense, moist loaf with a rich caramel-like sweetness. Shaping it into a ring made it feel instantly festive, especially when decorated with a small bow or placed on a holiday platter. Guests cut small slices, spread them with cream cheese, and enjoyed them alongside coffee or hot cider. It was the kind of treat that felt homemade and elegant at the same time. Date nut bread rings eventually fell out of favor as molded breads and ring pans disappeared from common kitchens, but they remain a beautiful example of mid-century holiday entertaining. In Betty Crocker's world, they symbolized hospitality, creativity, and warmth. They were meant to fill a table with generosity during the season of sharing. Cured venison shoulder with red-eye gravy was Christmas dinner, showing how preservation created celebration. The venison shoulder was cured in salt through late fall, transforming fresh meat into something that would last through winter. By Christmas, the shoulder had developed concentrated flavor, salty, slightly funky, intensely meaty. It was soaked to remove excess salt, then slow roasted until tender. The pan drippings were deglazed with strong black coffee, creating red-eye gravy, dark, slightly bitter, deeply savory. In mountain communities, cured venison meant Christmas protein that cost nothing but hunting skill and preservation knowledge. The meat was lean and dense, each slice packed with flavor that fresh venison couldn't match. Served with biscuits and greens, this was mountain fine dining earned through November hunts and December patience. The red-eye gravy cut through richness while adding complexity, proving simple techniques created profound results. Mincemeat pie was the spiced, boozy dessert that connected American Christmas to centuries of English tradition, its complex filling unlike any other holiday sweet. Traditional mincemeat combined beef sweet, dried fruits, apples, spices, and generous amounts of brandy or rum into a dark, intensely flavored filling that aged for weeks before baking. The mixture was spooned into pastry shells, often with decorative tops cut into holiday shapes. The flavor was challenging for modern palates, simultaneously sweet, savory, spiced, and boozy in ways that defied easy description. Families with English heritage maintained this tradition, making fresh mincemeat each autumn for Christmas pies. The commercial mincemeat that eventually replaced homemade versions was sweeter and simpler, lacking the complexity of the original. Mincemeat pie has largely disappeared from Christmas tables, replaced by familiar pumpkin and apple. Those who remember real mincemeat pie describe it with reverence as a taste of Christmas past. Squirrel stew bubbled on Christmas stovetops in Appalachian homes where hunting provided what wages couldn't. The small game animals transformed into rich, satisfying meals through patience and skill. Hunters brought home squirrels by the dozen throughout autumn, and the fattest ones were saved for holiday cooking. The animals were cleaned and jointed, then browned in bacon drippings before being covered with water and simmered for hours with potatoes, onions, and wild herbs gathered from nearby woods. The meat became tender and flavorful, its slightly gamey taste mellowed by long cooking and balanced by vegetables. Families gathered around large pots, ladling stew into bowls and using cornbread to soak up the rich gravy. Children grew up considering squirrel stew a holiday treat, never knowing that wealthier families might have looked down on such fare. The dish represented mountain self-reliance, the ability to provide Christmas dinner through skill with a rifle rather than money at the store. Syllabub was the frothy Christmas drink that preceded modern eggnog, a mixture of cream, wine, and sugar whipped until light and airy enough to float on top of glasses. The tradition came from England, where syllabub had been served at celebrations since Elizabethan times. American cooks adapted it using whatever wine or spirits were available, sherry, Madeira, or hard cider. The cream was whipped with sugar and lemon juice until it formed soft peaks. Then the wine was folded in gently to avoid deflating the mixture. Some versions were thin enough to drink, while others were thick enough to eat with spoons. Syllabub was served in special glasses that showed off the layers, frothy cream floating above the wine below. Guests would sip the wine first, then spoon up the cream. The drink was delicate and celebratory, meant for Christmas parties where elegance mattered. Few modern cooks know syllabub, though it once graced every proper holiday table. Pickled peaches were jeweled accompaniments that appeared beside Christmas hams, their spiced sweetness providing perfect counterpoint to rich meats. Canned peach halves were simmered in syrup infused with whole cloves, cinnamon sticks, and apple cider vinegar until they absorbed warm spices completely. The peaches emerged tender and glossy, their golden flesh tinged with amber from the spiced brine. Packed into jars, they could be preserved for months, ready to grace holiday tables whenever needed. Each peach half was studded with whole cloves, making them look almost decorative, edible ornaments for the dinner plate. The flavor was complex, simultaneously sweet, tart, and warmly spiced in ways that elevated simple sliced ham. Grandmothers often made these in late summer when fresh peaches were cheap, though canned versions worked nearly as well. Pickled peaches represented the tradition of putting up preserves, ensuring summer's sweetness could brighten even the darkest winter meals. Gingerbread trifle was the unsung hero of old-fashioned Christmas tables, a layered dessert that married warmth and sweetness in every bite. It began with leftover gingerbread, dense, dark, and fragrant with molasses, crumbled into pieces and stacked with custard or whipped cream. Sometimes cooks added bits of stewed fruit or poured coffee over the layers for richness. The result was humble and heavenly, a dessert born from thrift and creativity. No one wasted cake back then. Everything could be repurposed into something new and comforting. The contrast of soft cake and silky custard made every spoonful taste like a memory of home. The trifle bowl itself was a display of abundance, its layers glowing through the glass like stripes of gold and brown. Modern desserts might be neater or sweeter, but few carry the same heart. Gingerbread trifle was proof that the best holiday recipes were never about perfection. They were about care, family, and the joy of turning leftovers into love. Wild turkey roasted with chestnut dressing was Christmas dinner that required hunting success and forest knowledge. These weren't farm turkeys, but wild birds shot in December woods, their meat darker and more flavorful than domestic fowl. The turkey was stuffed with dressing made from dried cornbread, wild chestnuts gathered in fall, sage, and onions. Roasted slowly, the bird developed crispy skin while staying moist inside, the chestnut dressing absorbing juices and becoming rich and savory. In mountain communities, wild turkey represented Christmas success. The hunter who brought one home provided real celebration. The meat was lean and slightly gamey, requiring careful cooking to stay tender. Chestnuts added sweetness and texture impossible with modern ingredients. This was Christmas earned through December mornings in cold woods, through knowing turkey habits and shooting straight. The finished bird fed extended family, its presence on the table marking genuine achievement. Three-bean salad appeared at nearly every holiday gathering throughout the 1970s, its colorful layers making it as beautiful as it was economical. Green beans, yellow wax beans, and kidney beans were drained from cans and combined with sliced onions and bell peppers in large glass bowls. A marinade of oil, vinegar, sugar, and spices was poured over everything. Then the salad rested overnight while flavors melded. The result was tangy and crisp, each bean variety offering different texture and color. What made three-bean salad practical was its cost. Canned beans were inexpensive, and the salad stretched to feed crowds without straining budgets. It traveled well, too, making it a potluck favorite that arrived looking good. The dish required no heating and could sit at room temperature through long gatherings. Three-bean salad proved that simple preparations from pantry staples could earn places on festive tables alongside more elaborate offerings. Wassail was the Christmas punch that filled homes with the scent of warm spices and roasted apples, a drink meant for sharing with carolers and guests throughout the holiday season. The base was typically hard cider or ale, heated gently with cinnamon sticks, whole cloves, allspice berries, and slices of orange studded with more cloves. Small apples or crab apples were roasted until soft and floating, bursting when ladled into cups. Some recipes added sherry or brandy for extra warmth and celebration. The drink was served from large bowls, often ceramic or silver, that became family heirlooms passed down through generations. Wassailing itself was a tradition. Groups would travel house to house, singing carols in exchange for cups of the warming brew. The word came from Old English meaning good health, and toasting with wassail was believed to bring luck. Families kept the pot warm on the stove throughout Christmas Eve, refilling cups as guests arrived and conversation flowed. Leather breeches with fatback brought summer's green beans to Christmas through ancient preservation. These weren't canned beans, but fresh beans strung on thread in late summer and hung from rafters. By Christmas, they hung brown, rattling when touched. The beans were soaked overnight, then cooked slowly with fatback until tender. The result tasted like concentrated summer with smoky richness. In Appalachian homes, leather breeches represented connection between seasons, August abundance preserved for December. Grandmothers taught granddaughters proper stringing, threading beans carefully for drying. The beans hung all fall, visible reminders of summer work feeding Christmas tables. Cooked long, they became tender with chewy texture unlike fresh beans. The pot liquor was rich, sopped with cornbread. This represented mountain resourcefulness, preserving without equipment, feeding families through winter using thread and time. Potato peel soup stretched the ultimate scraps into Christmas dinner when even whole potatoes were too valuable to spare. The peels simmered into broth that filled empty stomachs with whatever nourishment could be extracted. After potatoes were peeled for other uses, the skins were saved, washed carefully, and boiled with onions and whatever seasonings the kitchen held. The starch in the peels released during cooking, thickening the liquid into something between broth and gravy that clung to the spoon. Some families added a bit of milk when available, others kept the soup clear and simple. The flavor was subtle, earthy, and comforting despite its humble origins. Children ate potato peel soup without knowing it represented the end of resources, while parents served it with forced cheerfulness. The dish represented survival at its most basic, the refusal to waste even the scraps of scraps. Potato peel soup was Christmas dinner when there was nothing else. Waldorf salad was the crisp, creamy combination that brought elegance to Christmas tables, its apples, celery, and walnuts dressed in mayonnaise and served on lettuce cups. Created at New York's Waldorf Astoria Hotel, the salad spread to home kitchens where it became synonymous with refined holiday dining. The apples were diced small, their tartness balanced by creamy mayonnaise and crunchy walnuts. Some cooks added grapes or raisins for extra sweetness, while others kept it simple. The salad was served on beds of iceberg lettuce, its pale colors looking sophisticated against the green. Making Waldorf salad required careful timing. The apples would brown if prepared too early, so it was often made just before serving. The dish represented the era's fascination with hotel cuisine, when recreating restaurant dishes at home was a mark of sophistication. Waldorf salad has largely vanished from Christmas tables, replaced by green salads that seem lighter and more modern. Harvard beets brought deep crimson elegance to holiday tables, their sweet and sour glaze glistening like rubies under dining room lights. The dish took its name from the university whose color it matched, though the connection ended there. Cooks sliced cooked beets into rounds, then simmered them in sauce of sugar, cornstarch, vinegar, and butter until the glaze thickened and coated each piece. The result was simultaneously sweet and tangy, earthiness balanced by bright acidity. Some recipes called for orange zest or cloves, adding complexity to the straightforward preparation. The vibrant color made Harvard beets a visual dream, adding drama to tables dominated by browns and beiges. Children often resisted at first, but the sweet glaze converted many skeptics. This was practical cooking too, as canned beets worked perfectly fine when fresh ones were unavailable during winter. Harvard beets represented an era when vegetables were dressed up for company, transformed from everyday nutrition into worthy holiday companions. Oyster stew appeared on Christmas Eve tables across America, a tradition combining simplicity with subtle luxury during the holiday season. The dish required nothing more than fresh oysters, butter, milk or cream, and careful attention to timing. Overcook the oysters and they turned rubbery, undercook them, and flavor stayed hidden. Cooks heated milk gently, added butter until it melted into golden pools, then slipped in oysters and their precious liquor just long enough for edges to curl. Salt, pepper, and perhaps Worcestershire completed the seasoning. The stew was ladled into warm bowls, each serving containing several plump oysters swimming in rich, briny broth. Oyster crackers floated on top, adding crunch to each spoonful. The tradition had practical origins. Catholics abstained from meat on Christmas Eve, making seafood the natural choice. But the stew also symbolized abundance, a moment of quiet celebration before the feast to come. Families passed this custom through generations, the simple bowl becoming sacred ritual. Turkey almondine casserole was Betty Crocker's answer to the week after Christmas when leftover turkey filled refrigerators and families wanted something warm and new. She mixed turkey with a creamy sauce, vegetables, rice, or noodles, and topped it with toasted almonds for crunch. The casserole baked into a comforting dish that stretched leftovers into another complete meal, making the holiday season feel abundant even after the main feast was gone. It represented a style of cooking where nothing was wasted and every ingredient could be transformed into something special. Over time, casseroles changed, but turkey almondine remains part of Betty Crocker's approach to thrifty holiday cooking. It reminded families that creativity mattered just as much as cost, and that even simple dishes could feel luxurious with one thoughtful topping. The warm aroma drifting from the oven made homes feel full again even after the big day had passed. Potato candy was one of those desserts that sounded like a mistake, but tasted like a miracle. Born in Appalachian kitchens, it began with a single mashed potato, a cheap, filling staple turned unexpectedly sweet. Cooks would mix the potato with powdered sugar until it formed a dough, roll it out flat, and spread a layer of peanut butter across the top before rolling it tight like a jelly log. The result was a swirled candy, soft and rich, that melted in your mouth with the flavor of simplicity itself. It was a Christmas favorite for families with little to spare, proof that even the humblest ingredient could become something special. Children would slice the rolls and sneak bites while they were still soft, unable to wait for them to firm up in the cool air. Potato candy was a sweet born of imagination and survival, a dessert that turned necessity into joy. It may not fit modern ideas of confectionery art, but in those lean years, it was as treasured as any box of chocolates. Creamed onions were the pearly white side dish that appeared in silver serving bowls at Christmas dinners across America, their mild sweetness balanced by rich bechamel. Small pearl onions were peeled by hand, a tedious job that left cooks weeping but yielded incomparable results. The onions were simmered until just tender, then folded into a sauce of butter, flour, cream, and sometimes a touch of nutmeg that coated each pearl in velvety richness. The finished dish looked almost like a dessert, the pale onions glistening in their creamy bath. Families passed the bowl around the table, spooning modest portions alongside roast beef or turkey. The flavor was subtle, the onions sweet and soft against the rich sauce. Making creamed onions from scratch required patience and skill, the sauce needing constant attention to prevent lumps. By the 1980s, frozen pearl onions and canned cream soups had replaced the handmade version, and eventually the dish vanished entirely from most Christmas tables. Crackling cornbread emerged from cast-iron skillets at Christmas dinners, where wheat flour was too expensive and leftover pork scraps needed purpose. The cracklings, crispy bits of rendered pork fat and skin, were folded into cornmeal batter, adding richness and texture that transformed simple bread into something special. The batter was poured into a skillet greased with lard and preheated until smoking, creating a crust that shattered when cut. Inside, the cornbread stayed moist and tender, studded with salty, chewy cracklings that delivered bursts of pork flavor in every bite. The bread accompanied whatever else appeared on the table, soaking up gravies and pot liquors that might otherwise go to waste. Making crackling cornbread used every part of the hog, wasting nothing in kitchens where waste was unthinkable. Children fought over the corner pieces with the most crust. Crackling cornbread represented ingenuity, the transformation of scraps into something eagerly anticipated. Duchess potatoes transformed humble mashed potatoes into piped rosettes, worthy of any French restaurant, their golden peaks adding architectural drama to holiday platters. Potatoes were boiled, mashed with butter and egg yolks, then seasoned carefully before being loaded into pastry bags with star tips. The mixture was piped onto baking sheets in decorative swirls, then baked until peaks turned golden while centers stayed creamy. The technique required practice. The mixture needed the right consistency to pipe smoothly without being too soft to hold shape. Hostesses who mastered Duchess potatoes earned reputations as accomplished cooks. The presentation elevated what might otherwise be another bowl of mashed potatoes into something guests photographed before eating. Children were often assigned counting duties, ensuring each guest received their share. Duchess potatoes proved that technique could transform the ordinary into the extraordinary, requiring only skill rather than expensive ingredients. Christmas goose was once the centerpiece of holiday tables before turkey claimed that position, offering darker meat and richer flavor that many families preferred. Preparing a goose required skill few modern cooks possess. The bird's thick fat layer needed careful rendering to avoid greasiness while keeping meat moist. Cooks would prick the skin repeatedly, roast the goose on a rack to let fat drip away, and collect precious drippings for other uses throughout the year. The rendered goose fat was culinary gold, perfect for roasting potatoes or frying vegetables. Stuffings ranged from simple bread and onion to elaborate mixtures featuring apples, chestnuts, or prunes. The bird emerged from the oven with crispy mahogany skin and meat that tasted of the season itself. Families served goose with roasted root vegetables, red cabbage, and gravy made from drippings. The tradition connected American tables to European ancestors who had celebrated with goose for centuries. Shrimp cocktail was the luxurious appetizer that opened Christmas dinner with pink crescents arranged around cocktail sauce. Each shrimp a small indulgence. Large shrimp were poached until just pink, chilled thoroughly, then hung over the rims of stemmed glasses filled with spicy red sauce. The presentation was classic, the shrimp curving elegantly, the sauce bright and inviting. Guests would pluck shrimp by their tails, dip them in sauce, and eat them in 1 or 2 bites. The cocktail sauce was homemade, combining ketchup, horseradish, lemon juice, and Worcestershire into something tangy and sharp. Shrimp cocktail represented accessible luxury, expensive enough to feel special but simple enough for home preparation. The dish appeared at dinner parties and holiday gatherings throughout the era. While shrimp cocktail hasn't completely disappeared, the formal presentation, stemmed glasses, individual portions, has given way to casual platters that lack the original's elegance. Chicken feet soup simmered on Christmas stoves in communities where every part of the bird found purpose, the gelatinous feet creating broth richer than any made from expensive cuts. Butchers gave away feet for pennies or nothing, considering them waste that customers would reject. But knowing cooks understood that feet contained collagen that melted into silky, bodybuilding broth during hours of slow simmering. The feet were cleaned thoroughly, blanched to remove impurities, then added to pots with vegetables and herbs. The resulting soup was golden and rich, its texture almost creamy from dissolved gelatin. Families served it as a first course before whatever main dish the budget allowed, the soup warming bodies and filling stomachs. Children might have been squeamish about the feet floating in their bowls, but they loved the taste. Chicken feet soup represented the wisdom of waste-nothing cooking, transforming discards into nourishment. Tomato gravy over biscuits appeared on Christmas morning tables when meat was scarce, but tomatoes had been canned from summer gardens, the tangy red gravy providing flavor that plain biscuits couldn't offer alone. The gravy started with bacon drippings or butter, flour stirred in to make a roux, then home-canned tomatoes added with their liquid until the mixture thickened into something between sauce and gravy. Sugar balanced the tomatoes' acidity while salt and pepper rounded out the flavor. The gravy was ladled hot over fresh biscuits split open on plates, their fluffy interiors soaking up the tangy liquid. Children loved the bright flavor, and adults appreciated how the dish stretched pantry staples into something festive. Tomato gravy over biscuits represented the ingenuity of preserving summer's bounty for winter celebrations, turning canned goods into Christmas breakfast. The dish proved that holiday meals could be built from whatever the cellar held. Whole hog shoulder with crackling bread was Christmas feast requiring community effort, turning December butchering into celebration. Mountain families raised hogs specifically for Christmas slaughter, feeding them all year. The shoulder was large enough to feed extended family, fatty enough to stay moist during long cooking. It was seasoned with salt and pepper, then slow roasted over hickory coals in outdoor pits men tended throughout Christmas Eve night. Fat rendered slowly, creating crispy bark outside while inside stayed tender. Women saved cracklings, crispy rendered pork fat bits, to mix into cornbread batter. The crackling bread baked in cast iron skillets, top golden and crunchy. In rural Georgia, Arkansas, and Mississippi, this meant Christmas smelling like wood smoke for miles. Families gathered around outdoor fires, sharing whiskey and stories while meat cooked through cold night. The finished shoulder pulled apart easily, juice running into crackling bread. Maple butter-baked ham was one of Betty Crocker's most beloved Christmas dinner features, a warm, fragrant centerpiece that brought sweetness and comfort to the table. The ham was scored carefully, then brushed with a glaze made from melted butter maple syrup and spices, creating a glossy coating that caramelized as it baked. Throughout the cooking process, she basted it again and again, allowing the glaze to seep into the meat and form a rich golden crust. The aroma of warm maple and savory ham filled the house, drifting through every room and signaling that Christmas dinner was nearing. Families sliced it into thick, tender pieces, served with potatoes, vegetables, and rolls that soaked up the extra glaze. This dish represented a time when holiday meals were built on tradition and the belief that a little sweetness could elevate even the simplest ingredients. The maple glaze gave the ham a luxurious feel without adding much cost, making it perfect for families who wanted something special but still practical. Over the years, the dish faded as honey-baked hams and store-prepared options rose in popularity. Still, the memory of maple butter-baked ham remains in old Betty Crocker books, a reminder of Christmas dinners made slowly with care. It was a dish meant to bring people together around a warm table, glowing with the sense of the season. Ham bone soup became Christmas dinner when the bone itself was the only gift families could afford, the remnant of someone else's feast transformed into a meal for those with less. Churches and wealthier neighbors sometimes donated ham bones after their own celebrations, and grateful recipients knew exactly how to honor such gifts. The bone went into the largest pot with dried beans that had been soaking overnight, along with onions, carrots, and potatoes from the root cellar. Hours of simmering coaxed every bit of smoky flavor from the bone, while beans softened into creamy submission. The soup thickened as starches released, becoming more stew than broth by the time it reached the table. Families ladled generous portions into bowls, knowing this single bone would feed everyone for days. Ham bone soup represented community and generosity, the understanding that sharing meant everyone could celebrate. Oyster stew was the Christmas Eve tradition that brought coastal flavors to holiday tables across America, even in landlocked states. Fresh oysters were gently poached in their own liquor with butter, cream, and just enough seasoning to enhance their briny sweetness. The stew was served in warmed bowls with oyster crackers floating on top, each spoonful delivering plump oysters in rich, silky broth. Families maintained this tradition from generations past, when oysters were abundant and affordable enough for working-class celebrations. The dish required restraint. Overcooking turned oysters rubbery. Too much seasoning masked their delicate flavor. Some families added celery or a touch of sherry, but purists insisted on simplicity. By the 1980s, oyster prices had risen and the tradition faded. Those who grew up with oyster stew Christmas Eves remember the ritual of shucking, the anticipation, and the briny warmth that meant the holiday had truly begun. Backbone stew with root vegetables was Christmas dinner that used December butchering and fall harvest together. The pork backbones were meaty but inexpensive, perfect for slow-cooked stews. Combined with stored potatoes, turnips, carrots, and onions, they created rich, hearty meal. Simmered for hours, the bones released flavor and gelatin, while vegetables softened into the broth. In mountain communities, backbone stew represented Christmas economy, using cuts others overlooked and vegetables stored from harvest. The stew was thick and satisfying, its broth rich with pork flavor. Served with cornbread, it fed large families affordably while still feeling celebratory. The meat fell off bones easily. The vegetables were tender and sweet. This was Christmas dinner that proved celebration didn't require expensive cuts when you had time, patience, and knowledge of how slow cooking transformed humble ingredients into something genuinely delicious and nourishing. Turkey-stuffed celery boats were the retro cold appetizer from Betty Crocker's 60s and 70s. Christmas hostess sections combining leftover turkey with mayonnaise seasonings and sometimes chopped vegetables. The mixture was spooned into crisp celery sticks, creating a refreshing, crunchy bite that balanced richer dishes. These celery boats appeared on party trays at a time when presentation favored neat, tidy finger foods that guests could enjoy while mingling. Though rarely seen now, they represent a chapter of holiday entertaining built around thrift, creativity, and charm. Angel pie with lemon filling was the delicate meringue-crusted dessert that once dazzled mid-century Christmas tables with its airy texture and bright flavor. The crust was made from whipped egg whites and sugar, baked until crisp, then filled with silky lemon cream and chilled. Its snowy appearance and light citrus taste made it a perfect winter dessert, especially for hostesses who wanted something elegant. Over time, it faded from popularity, but vintage Betty Crocker books preserve this ethereal pie as one of the gentlest, sweetest holiday treats of its era. Old-fashioned prune cake was a humble masterpiece of Southern baking, dense, dark, and rich with spice. It looked plain on the surface, but each slice was moist with pure comfort. Prunes, soaked and mashed, gave it sweetness and depth long before refined sugar was affordable or common. Cinnamon, clove, and nutmeg added warmth, while buttermilk and molasses tied everything together. This was the kind of cake that aged well, improving each day it sat wrapped in paper on the counter. It was a grandmother's favorite. Never flashy, always dependable. Served at Christmas with coffee or whipped cream, it spoke of thrift, patience, and love that did not need decoration. Modern tastes might overlook it for lack of frosting, but one bite could remind anyone why the old recipes lasted so long. They filled you up, not just in body, but in heart. Molded Waldorf salad was the elegant combination of apples, celery, walnuts, and mayonnaise suspended in shimmering gelatin that graced formal holiday tables. Classic Waldorf ingredients were folded into partially set lemon gelatin, poured into decorative molds, and chilled until firm. Unmolded onto lettuce, the salad held its shape beautifully while delivering familiar flavors in each quivering slice. The gelatin added visual appeal the original creamy version lacked, transforming simple fruit salad into something worthy of special occasions. Some versions added marshmallows for sweetness, while others kept the base true to origins. The dish could be made a day ahead, freeing time on busy Christmas morning. Molded Waldorf salad represented the era's fascination with gelatin as an ingredient that could elevate ordinary foods, turning the everyday into extraordinary. Boiled custard was Christmas drink that replaced expensive eggnog in mountain households. This wasn't thick custard, but pourable drink made from milk, eggs, and sugar cooked gently until it thickened slightly. Flavored with vanilla or nutmeg, it was served cold in glasses throughout Christmas Day. In rural communities, boiled custard represented accessible luxury, creating something special from everyday ingredients. The drink was sweet and creamy, coating the tongue with richness. Children loved it because it tasted like melted ice cream, while adults appreciated its elegance. Made in large batches, boiled custard lasted through Christmas week, becoming a daily reminder of celebration. This proved mountain families could create holiday traditions that felt luxurious despite costing almost nothing, transforming simple ingredients through technique and care into something genuinely special that rivaled any store-bought treat families might dream of. Sugar plum candy was Christmas magic rolled into bite-sized memory. Despite what the poem suggests, sugar plums were not plums at all. They were small, hand-rolled balls of dried fruit, honey, nuts, and spice, each one glimmering under a dusting of sugar. Making them was an act of patience, not luxury. Families in the 1800s crushed figs and dates, stirred in crushed almonds, and worked the mixture by hand until it was sticky and warm. They were shaped, rolled, and left to set overnight, filling homes with the scent of cloves and orange peel. Sugar plums were gifts, offerings, and treasures tucked into paper boxes for neighbors or children. They symbolized sweetness earned through effort, the kind of treat made only once a year when time slowed down enough to do it right. Today, they are a ghost of the Victorian table, replaced by chocolates wrapped in foil or store-bought truffles. But back then, a single sugar plum could make a child feel rich. It was joy you could taste and love you could hold in your hand. Standing rib roast was the king of Christmas meats, its impressive size and rich marbling commanding respect from the moment it emerged from the oven. Butchers prepared these roasts with the bones still attached, creating a natural rack that elevated the meat for even cooking. The exterior was rubbed with garlic, salt, pepper, and fresh herbs, then roasted at high heat to create a deeply browned crust before the temperature dropped for slow cooking. Slicing revealed a gradient from well-done edges to rosy pink centers, allowing guests to choose their preferred doneness. The bones were fought over, gnawed clean at the table, or saved for soup. Yorkshire pudding was the traditional accompaniment, the batter puffing dramatically in the hot beef drippings. This was investment cooking, the roast costing more than a week's grocery budget, but justified by the holiday's importance. Standing rib roast represented prosperity and tradition, connecting American families to English Christmas customs. Holiday meatloaf with cherry glaze was Betty Crocker's attempt to dress up an inexpensive everyday dish for Christmas gatherings. The loaf was seasoned with onions, herbs, and breadcrumbs, then baked and brushed with a glossy cherry glaze that added sweetness, color, and shine. It brought a festive look to simple ingredients and made holiday meals feel abundant even when money was limited. Though unusual by modern standards, it reflects a time when presentation mattered and creativity turned inexpensive meals into something worthy of celebration. Families enjoyed its balance of savory and sweet, and the glaze made it look like something that belonged beside the more traditional holiday dishes. It was proof that even humble meals could feel special with the right touch. Venison backstrap with wild mushroom gravy was Christmas luxury harvested from November hunts and preserved for holiday feast. The backstrap was the tenderest deer cut, saved specifically for Christmas when families wanted something special. Hunters took their best bucks in late fall, field-dressed properly, and hung meat in cold sheds where December temperatures kept it fresh. The backstrap was sliced thick, seasoned with salt and pepper, then seared quickly in hot cast iron to keep inside pink and tender. Wild mushrooms gathered in fall and dried were reconstituted and cooked into rich gravy using pan drippings, creating earthy depth complementing venison. In mountain communities, venison Christmas meant rifle skill, understanding deer movement, and respect for animals giving lives to feed families. This wasn't bought meat, but earned through cold mornings in tree stands. The backstrap melted on tongue, flavor clean and sweet. Families served it with potatoes and beans. Creamed pearl onions were a labor of love that few modern cooks would undertake, requiring patience to peel dozens of tiny onions before drowning them in velvety white sauce. Cooks blanched the pearl onions briefly, then slipped off papery skins one by one, a task often assigned to older children as their holiday contribution. The peeled onions were simmered in milk until tender, then folded into rich bechamel sauce seasoned with nutmeg and white pepper. The finished dish was creamy and mild, the sweetness of cooked onions mellowing into something almost buttery. Served in china bowls alongside the roast, creamed pearl onions added elegance to tables where everyday meals were simpler. Some families topped theirs with breadcrumbs and broiled them golden, adding textural contrast to the silky interior. The dish spoke of abundance and effort, qualities that defined holiday entertaining in an era when convenience foods were beginning to dominate. Today, the ritual of peeling has disappeared, along with the dish itself. Seafood. Newburg was the luxurious first course that opened Christmas dinner with creamy richness and delicate shellfish. Lobster, shrimp, and sometimes crab meat were gently folded into a sauce of butter, cream, egg yolks, and sherry, the mixture served over toast points or in patty shells. The sauce was velvety and rich, coating each piece of seafood in decadent luxury that justified its holiday placement. Making Newburg required careful technique. The egg yolks could curdle if the sauce got too hot, ruining everything. Families served this as a first course before the main roast, a statement of abundance and sophistication. The dish came from Delmonico's restaurant in New York, spreading to home kitchens where ambitious cooks recreated its elegance. Seafood Newburg represented the era's formal dining culture, when Christmas dinner was multiple courses served with ceremony. It has largely vanished, replaced by simpler appetizers that don't require last-minute sauce making. Baked sweet potatoes with butter and cinnamon were Christmas side that elevated garden staples into celebration. The sweet potatoes were stored in root cellars from fall harvest, their starches converting to sugars through winter. By Christmas, they were intensely sweet and ready for baking. Roasted whole until soft and caramelized, the potatoes were split and topped with butter and cinnamon, creating simple perfection. In rural communities, sweet potatoes represented food security. Easy to grow, simple to store, delicious when prepared well. Christmas meant breaking out the biggest, best potatoes saved specifically for celebration. The flesh was orange and creamy, naturally sweet without added sugar. Children loved sweet potatoes because they tasted like dessert despite being dinner. This represented mountain Christmas philosophy, taking what grew easily and treating it with enough respect to make it special, proving celebration didn't require expensive ingredients when you had good land and patient hands. Tom and Jerry Batter Drink was the toast of every mid-century Christmas gathering, a warm and frothy cocktail that carried the hum of laughter and the glow of holiday lights. It was not just a drink, it was a ritual. Families gathered around punch bowls, the air heavy with the scent of nutmeg and rum, while someone carefully folded beaten egg whites into yolks and sugar. The result was a velvety batter spooned into mugs and topped with hot milk or brandy, frothing like a winter cloud. It was sweet, heavy, and meant to be sipped slowly while the record player hummed in the background. The Tom and Jerry was not for the faint-hearted. It took patience to make and could curdle with a careless stir. But those who mastered it had bragging rights, and each cup felt like liquid nostalgia. It was America's own festive elixir, a recipe that brought warmth to cold rooms and turned gatherings into memories. Sweet and sour red cabbage brought German heritage to American Christmas tables, its purple-red color adding drama to plates dominated by browns. Shredded cabbage was braised slowly with apples, onions, vinegar, sugar, and warming spices until tender and deeply flavored. The long cooking allowed sweet-sour balance to develop fully. Cloves and bay leaves added complexity, while apple pieces contributed natural sweetness. This dish was traditionally served alongside roast goose or pork, its acidity cutting through rich meats perfectly. The cabbage could be made days ahead and reheated, improving as flavors melded. Children often surprised themselves by enjoying it, the sweetness making the unfamiliar vegetable approachable. Sweet and sour red cabbage represented immigrant traditions that enriched American holiday tables, proving the best dishes traveled across oceans. Dried corn pudding was Christmas side that transformed summer's abundance into winter celebration. Field corn was dried on the cob in late summer, then cut off and stored in jars. Come Christmas, the dried corn was ground coarsely and simmered in milk with butter, sugar, and eggs until it became thick custard. The result was sweet and creamy with toothsome texture from corn pieces. In rural communities, dried corn pudding represented foresight, preserving August plenty for December scarcity. The pudding was comfort food that tasted like summer sunshine captured and held through winter darkness. Served warm, it accompanied ham or turkey perfectly, its sweetness balancing savory main dishes. This proved mountain cooks understood food preservation and flavor balance, creating dishes that honored both seasons and made winter celebrations possible through summer work and planning passed through generations. Orange clove-baked custard was the gently spiced dessert that warmed vintage Christmas tables, offering a soft, soothing sweetness without the heaviness of pies. Milk eggs, sugar orange zest, and cloves baked slowly into a silky custard that set into tender spoonfuls, glowing faintly golden. Served warm or chilled, it was a comforting, simple dessert that balanced richness with lightness. Families appreciated its practicality because it required basic ingredients and carried the holiday scent of citrus and spice. Though overshadowed by flashier desserts, it remains a quiet classic within Betty Crocker's winter recipes. Each spoonful held the gentle warmth of oranges and cloves, the very essence of an old-fashioned holiday night where the glow of the tree and the hush of winter made simple desserts taste extraordinary. Baked Alaska was the show-stopping dessert that proved a cook's mastery, its dome of meringue concealing ice cream that somehow survived a hot oven. The construction was engineering. Sponge cake base, firmly frozen ice cream shaped into a dome, then completely covered in meringue that was quickly browned in an extremely hot oven. The meringue insulated the ice cream, allowing the outside to turn golden while the inside stayed frozen. Slicing revealed the dramatic layers: brown meringue, white ice cream, golden cake. The presentation caused gasps around Christmas tables. Making Baked Alaska required precise timing and temperature control, with no room for error. Families reserved it for the most special occasions, when impressing guests was paramount. The dessert represented the era's love of dramatic presentations and technical challenges. Baked Alaska has largely vanished from home kitchens, surviving in occasional restaurant appearances where few remember its former holiday glory. Cranberry Candles mold was the kind of festive display that once sat proudly in the center of mid-century holiday tables, glowing red like stained glass under soft Christmas lights. Betty Crocker guides taught home cooks how to turn canned cranberry sauce, gelatin, and fruit into tall, candle-shaped molds that slid out of tin forms with a glossy wobble. Your grandparents loved these because they represented celebration on a budget, bright color without expensive ingredients, and a sense of style that made even simple meals feel special. The molds were often arranged on lettuce leaves or parsley borders with little almond slices or pineapple bits acting as pretend flames at the top. It was playful and decorative and absolutely everywhere in 1960s and 1970s cookbooks. Making them took patience because each mold had to chill long enough to hold its shape. But once they set, they looked like something pulled straight from a vintage magazine spread. Over time, gelatin dishes fell out of fashion, and cranberry candles mostly disappeared, leaving behind a memory of holidays when creativity mattered more than cost. The molds were not just food. They were holiday excitement in edible form, shaped by hands that wanted Christmas to feel magical no matter the budget. Possum roasted with sweet potatoes was Christmas dinner that filled mountain families with pride. These weren't desperate meals, but traditional feasts prepared with care. The possums were caught in late fall after feeding on persimmons and acorns, giving meat surprisingly sweet flavor. The cleaning was meticulous, with possums scrubbed thoroughly and parboiled to remove wild taste. Then they were stuffed with sweet potatoes, onions, and herbs before slow roasting in Dutch ovens. The sweet potatoes absorbed rich juices while skin turned crispy golden. In North Carolina, Tennessee, and Georgia hollows, Possum Christmas meant honoring traditions stretching back generations. Grandmothers taught daughters proper preparation, passing knowledge connecting families to ancestors. The meat was tender and slightly sweet. Served with cornbread and greens, this was mountain fine dining representing cultural identity stronger than judgment. Creamed spinach was the elegant green that appeared at formal holiday tables, transforming a vegetable many children feared into something rich enough to tempt skeptics. Fresh or frozen spinach was cooked until tender, then folded into bechamel sauce enriched with cream and nutmeg. The result was silky and indulgent, spinach's slight bitterness mellowed by dairy richness. Served in small portions from silver bowls, creamed spinach added sophistication to tables that might otherwise feel rustic. Some versions incorporated cream cheese for body, while others kept the sauce light to let spinach shine. The dish required careful preparation. Overcooking turned spinach army green, but rewards justified the attention. Creamed spinach represented the era's appreciation for vegetables treated as worthy of the same care as meats and desserts, elevated beyond nutrition. Baked ham with pineapple rings and maraschino cherries was the iconic centerpiece that defined American Christmas through the 1960s and 70s. The ham, usually a bone-in shank or butt portion, was scored in diamond patterns, each intersection studded with a whole clove that released fragrance as it baked. Canned pineapple rings were arranged across the surface and secured with toothpicks, a bright red cherry placed in each ring's center. Brown sugar and mustard glaze was brushed over everything, caramelizing into sticky sweetness that dripped down the sides. The presentation was unmistakably festive, the ham gleaming amber and gold under dining room lights. Slicing revealed pink meat with that distinctive ham flavor that paired perfectly with sweet glaze. Families served this alongside scalloped potatoes, green bean casserole, and dinner rolls. The pineapple cherry ham has become a punchline today, dismissed as kitschy, but for millions it represented Christmas abundance and maternal love. Beans and cornbread made Christmas dinner in homes where meat was unthinkable luxury, the combination providing complete protein that kept bodies strong through winter's coldest days. Dried beans, pintos, Great Northerns, or whatever variety was cheapest, soaked overnight before simmering all day with onion and salt. The cornbread baked in cast iron, its bottom crust crackling and golden from the preheated skillet. Together, beans and cornbread created a meal that was both filling and nutritious. the amino acids from each combining to provide what neither could alone. Families ladled beans into bowls and crumbled cornbread on top, the bread soaking up the bean liquor until it became almost like dumplings. The meal cost pennies, but delivered satisfaction that expensive dishes couldn't match. Beans and cornbread represented survival, the understanding that celebration didn't require wealth, only the wisdom to use humble ingredients well. Fried apple pies with sorghum were Christmas dessert that children waited for all year. Dried apples from summer harvest were rehydrated and cooked down with sorghum syrup, cinnamon, and nutmeg until thick and jammy. The filling was enclosed in circles of biscuit dough, crimped shut, and fried in hot lard until golden and crackling. The result was handheld Christmas joy. Crispy outside, molten apple inside, sweet and spiced. In rural communities, fried apple pies meant celebration accessible to poorest families, since dried apples cost nothing but summer work. Children received these as special treats, burning their mouths on hot filling while snow fell outside. The pies were portable, lasting days without refrigeration, making them perfect for holiday visiting. Each bite delivered concentrated apple sweetness balanced by pastry crunch, proving that simplest ingredients could create genuine luxury when prepared with care and love passed through generations. Scalloped potatoes au gratin were the bubbling, golden casserole that emerged from ovens across America, their creamy layers and crispy cheese topping satisfying even the pickiest guests. Potatoes were sliced thin by hand, no food processors yet, then layered in baking dishes with butter, flour, cream, and sharp cheddar cheese. The casserole baked slowly, the potatoes softening as the sauce thickened and the top turned golden brown. Each serving revealed those beautiful layers, potato slices held together by rich, cheesy sauce. Families made these potatoes for every major holiday, the recipe unchanged for generations. The dish required time and attention, the potatoes needing thin, even slices for proper cooking. Children loved the crispy edges and cheese, while adults appreciated how the richness complemented roast meats. Modern scalloped potatoes often use shortcuts, but nothing matches the version made from scratch with patience and real cream. Molasses taffy pull was not just a recipe. It was a ritual of laughter and warmth that filled the long winter nights of the 1800s. Families would gather in the kitchen as the syrup boiled thick and dark, the scent of sugar and smoke curling into the rafters. Once the mixture was poured out to cool, the real fun began. Buttered hands pulling and stretching the golden ribbons until they turned pale and glossy. It was sticky work, but it brought people together in a way no store-bought candy could. Children giggled as strands tangled between their fingers, and adults swapped stories as they twisted the soft candy into ropes. When finished, the taffy was cut, wrapped in bits of wax paper, and shared as tokens of love. It was both a dessert and a memory-making event, a celebration of patience and play. Today, few kitchens see such scenes, but if you've ever pulled a strand of warm sugar by hand, you know it's more than candy. It's connection. Liver and onions appeared on Christmas tables when the luxury cuts went to wealthier customers. The organ meat sold for pennies to families who knew how to make it delicious. Liver was soaked in milk to remove any bitterness, then sliced thin and dredged in seasoned flour before frying in hot fat until crispy outside but still pink within. Onions fried alongside turned sweet and caramelized, their flavor balancing the liver's mineral richness. The combination was served over mashed potatoes or with bread to soak up the pan drippings that carried concentrated flavor. Children either loved or hated liver, but parents served it knowing the iron and vitamins it provided were essential for growing bodies during lean times. Liver and onions cost a fraction of steak, but delivered more nutrition per bite. The dish represented practical eating, the understanding that organ meat sustained life as effectively as the muscle cuts that cost far more. Chestnut stuffing was the old-fashioned filling that connected American Christmas to European traditions, its sweet nuttiness complementing roast poultry perfectly. Fresh chestnuts were scored, roasted until the shells split, then peeled. a labor-intensive process that took hours but yielded incomparable flavor. The peeled chestnuts were crumbled and mixed with bread cubes, sausage, onions, and herbs, the mixture moistened with stock. The texture was substantial, the chestnuts adding richness that dried bread alone couldn't provide. Families with European heritage maintained this tradition, passing down techniques for the temperamental nuts. Fresh chestnuts were available only seasonally, sold by street vendors who knew their customers waited all year. This stuffing has nearly disappeared, replaced by packaged versions that can't match the original. The labor required, and the disappearance of fresh chestnut vendors, ended a tradition that once defined Christmas flavor. Potato soup with dumplings became Christmas dinner when the cellar held nothing but potatoes and flour. The humble ingredients transformed through cooking into something that felt like celebration. Potatoes were diced and simmered in water with onions and whatever seasonings the pantry held until they softened and began breaking down into the liquid. Meanwhile, dumplings were mixed from flour, salt, and water or milk, then dropped by spoonfuls into the simmering soup where they puffed and cooked through. The finished dish was thick and hearty, each bowl containing potato chunks, fluffy dumplings, and rich broth thickened by potato starch. A bit of butter or bacon fat added richness when available, transforming plain vegetables into comfort. Potato soup with dumplings represented the determination to make Christmas dinner from whatever was on hand, refusing to let poverty steal the holiday spirit from families who deserved celebration. Roast goose was the traditional Christmas bird before turkey claimed the holiday throne, its rich, dark meat and crispy skin gracing tables for centuries. Families who kept geese would select their Christmas bird months in advance, fattening it until it reached proper size. The preparation began the night before, with the bird hung to dry so the skin would crisp properly during roasting. Goose fat rendered during cooking was saved religiously, liquid gold for roasting potatoes throughout the winter. The meat was darker and richer than turkey, with a flavor that demanded respect and proper accompaniments like red cabbage and applesauce. Carving goose required different skills than turkey, the anatomy being distinct. By the 1980s, goose had largely disappeared from American Christmas tables, replaced by the blander but more forgiving turkey. Those who remember goose Christmases speak of them with reverence, mourning a tradition that connected them to centuries of holiday feasting. Wild greens mess with ham hock was Christmas side that brought spring preservation to winter table. In spring, mountain families gathered wild greens, poke, lamb's quarters, dandelion, and canned them for winter. By Christmas, these jars represented summer work and wild food knowledge. The greens were cooked long and slow with smoked ham hock until tender and richly flavored. The pot liquor was savory and nourishing, meant to be sopped up with cornbread. In Appalachian communities, wild greens meant Christmas connection to land and seasons. Proving celebration included foods gathered free from hillsides. The greens were slightly bitter, balanced by ham's saltiness and smokiness. This was nutrition and tradition combined, teaching children that Christmas abundance came from knowing land and being willing to work hard, preserving what nature provided freely to those with knowledge and respect. Pot liquor and cornbread dumplings turned the cooking liquid from greens into Christmas soup that wasted nothing and nourished everyone. After collards or turnip greens simmered with pork for hours, the resulting pot liquor was rich with vitamins, minerals, and smoky pork flavor. Rather than discarding this precious liquid, cooks dropped cornmeal dumplings into the simmering broth, where they puffed and absorbed the flavorful liquor. The dumplings were served in bowls with pot liquor ladled over, creating a complete meal from what might otherwise have been thrown away. Families understood that the liquid held as much nutrition as the greens themselves, making pot liquor too valuable to waste. Children slurped the broth and ate dumplings while adults appreciated the economy of the dish. Pot liquor and dumplings represented the waste-nothing philosophy that kept poor families fed. Every drop of cooking liquid honored and used. Roast duck with orange sauce was the continental-inspired dish that sophisticated families served to demonstrate their worldly tastes. The duck was pricked all over to release fat, then roasted slowly until the skin turned impossibly crisp while the meat stayed moist. Orange sauce was made from scratch, combining fresh juice, zest, stock, and sometimes Grand Marnier into something bright that balanced the rich meat. The presentation was classic. Sliced duck breast fanned across plates, sauce drizzled artfully, orange segments providing color. This was aspirational cooking, inspired by French restaurants and Julia Child's television appearances. Duck required more skill than turkey or chicken, its higher fat content demanding different techniques. The dish represented cultural ambition, families embracing international cuisine as a mark of sophistication. Today, duck rarely appears on home Christmas tables, reserved for restaurants where few experience its former holiday glory. Japanese fruitcake had nothing to do with Japan. The name remains a mystery, but the cake itself was pure Southern Christmas tradition. 3 or 4 spice cake layers alternated with coconut-filled layers, the whole construction held together by a boiled white frosting, studded with fresh coconut and sometimes raisins. The spice layers were dark with cinnamon, allspice, cloves, and nutmeg, while the white layers stayed pale and tender. Between each layer went the filling, a cooked mixture of coconut, sugar, and sometimes crushed pineapple that added moisture and tropical sweetness. The finished cake was massive, often requiring a special stand to display properly at holiday gatherings. Slicing revealed the dramatic contrast between dark and light layers, each bite offering different flavors and textures. Grandmothers guarded their Japanese fruitcake recipes, passing them to daughters who continued the tradition. The cake required an entire day to assemble properly, but lasted through the holiday week. Mock pecan pie was proof that resourcefulness can taste like luxury. When pecans were too expensive or impossible to find, clever home bakers turned to oatmeal or crushed crackers for the filling. They mixed it with syrup, sugar, and butter to recreate the texture and sweetness of the real thing, and somehow, it worked. The pie came out golden, gooey, and rich enough to make anyone forget it was an imitation. During hard times, mock recipes like this kept the spirit of celebration alive when ingredients were rationed or simply gone. Families gathered around the same table, cutting into something made from almost nothing, and no one complained. It was less about what went into the pie than about what it represented: hope, cleverness, and a touch of defiance. Today, few remember the recipe, but its lesson remains timeless. Sometimes the best desserts are born from making do. Every flaky crust held a story of survival that tasted like sweetness itself. Neck bones and rice stretched across Christmas tables in homes where ham was a luxury and turkey was a dream. The bony cuts simmered until their meat fell apart into savory shreds. Pork neck bones cost almost nothing because butchers considered them more bone than meat, but families knew better. Hours of simmering extracted every bit of flavor, the bones releasing gelatin that thickened the cooking liquid into rich gravy. The meat, though sparse, was deeply flavored and satisfying when spooned over mounds of rice that absorbed the pork-infused liquid. Some families added onions and garlic, others kept it simple with just salt and pepper. The dish required no special skills, only patience and a heavy pot that could withstand hours on the stove. Children learned to pick around bones, finding every tender morsel hidden in the joints. Neck bones and rice represented survival cooking at its most practical, turning what others discarded into Christmas dinner. Ambrosia salad was the fluffy, sweet concoction that straddled the line between side dish and dessert, its marshmallows and coconut creating something uniquely American. Canned mandarin oranges, pineapple chunks, and maraschino cherries were folded with miniature marshmallows, shredded coconut, and sour cream. The mixture was chilled overnight, allowing flavors to meld and marshmallows to soften. Served in cut glass bowls, the pastel colors seemed appropriately festive. Children especially loved ambrosia, often requesting second helpings despite protests about ruining their appetite. The dish required no cooking, making it perfect for busy kitchens where oven space was precious. Some families added pecans or used cottage cheese, each variation reflecting regional preferences. Ambrosia has largely disappeared from Christmas tables, dismissed as too sweet and artificial, but for decades it was a beloved tradition that children anticipated all year. Boiled custard was the Christmas drink that arrived in punch bowls and crystal cups, a silky smooth beverage that warmed both hands and hearts during the holiday season. Unlike store-bought eggnog, this custard was cooked slowly on the stovetop, with patient cooks stirring constantly to prevent curdling while eggs, sugar, and whole milk transformed into something velvety. The process required attention. Too much heat and the eggs would scramble, too little and the custard stayed thin. Grandmothers knew exactly when to remove the pot from the heat, that moment when the mixture coated a wooden spoon and held its shape. Vanilla and nutmeg were added at the end, filling kitchens with the scent of the season. The custard was served cold in small cups, sometimes with bourbon for adults. Children waited eagerly for their share, knowing boiled custard meant Christmas had truly arrived. Families made gallons, sharing with neighbors and bringing it to church gatherings where it disappeared within minutes. Brandied peaches were the elegant preserved fruit that appeared in crystal compote dishes, their golden halves swimming in spiced syrup. Summer peaches were poached in sugar syrup infused with cinnamon, cloves, and generous amounts of brandy, then jarred and aged until Christmas. The peaches softened and absorbed the boozy syrup, becoming something more complex than fresh fruit could ever be. Served alongside ham or as dessert with cream, brandied peaches added sophistication to holiday tables, making them required planning. The best peaches came from August harvests, preserved specifically for December. The jars themselves were beautiful, often given as hostess gifts. The flavor balanced sweet fruit with warming spice and alcohol. Home canning has largely disappeared, taking brandied peaches with it. Those who remember them recall opening a jar saved since summer, tasting preserved sunshine on the darkest days of winter. Poor man's fruitcake appeared at Christmas when the traditional version's expensive ingredients were beyond reach, substituting whatever dried fruits and nuts the pantry held. Real fruitcake required candied citrus, exotic spices, and aged spirits that working families couldn't afford. The poor man's version used raisins, dried apples, and whatever nuts could be gathered from nearby trees, bound with molasses instead of sugar. The batter was dense and dark, baked slowly until a knife came out clean, then wrapped in cloth to age until Christmas morning. Though lacking candied cherries and imported almonds, this humble cake delivered the same comforting density and spiced sweetness that defined holiday baking. Families sliced it thin, making each loaf last through the season. Poor man's fruitcake represented adaptation, the willingness to participate in tradition even when resources demanded substitution. The taste was different, but the meaning remained. Spiced crab apples were the garnish that elevated holiday platters from ordinary to elegant, their deep ruby color and clove-studded skins announcing celebration. Whole crab apples were simmered in sweetened vinegar syrup infused with cinnamon sticks, cloves, and allspice until they turned translucent and tender. The fruits were packed into jars with their spiced liquid and stored for weeks, improving as flavors concentrated. Come Christmas, they were arranged around roasts and hams like edible jewels, their glossy skins catching candlelight beautifully. The taste was intensely sweet-tart, with warming spice notes that complemented rich meats. Some families made their own from backyard trees, while others relied on store-bought versions. Children often avoided them, but adults treasured spiced crab apples as essential holiday tradition. The jars themselves became gifts, wrapped in ribbon for neighbors. Spiced crab apples represented the artistry of preservation, autumn's harvest transformed into winter's ornament. Rabbit fricassee graced Christmas tables in rural communities where wild game provided protein that store-bought meat could never match in freshness or economy. Hunters brought home rabbits throughout December, and the best were saved for holiday feasts. The rabbit was jointed and browned in bacon fat until golden, then braised in milk or cream with onions and herbs until the meat fell from the bones. The cooking liquid thickened into velvety gravy that coated every piece, served over biscuits or alongside mashed potatoes. Rabbit meat was lean and delicate, its mild flavor absorbing whatever seasonings the cook applied. Families who hunted their Christmas dinner understood the connection between land and table that store-bought food could never provide. Rabbit fricassee represented self-sufficiency, the ability to provide for family through skill rather than cash. The dish tasted of independence and the understanding that nature offered abundance. Pork backbone and dumplings was Christmas comfort food that transformed butchering remnants into soul-warming celebration. The backbone, cut from hogs during December slaughter, was meaty enough to flavor broth but cheap enough for everyday tables. The bones simmered for hours with onions and black pepper until meat fell away tender. Then dumplings were dropped into bubbling broth. Flour, lard, and buttermilk rolled thin and cut into strips. They puffed up while cooking, absorbing rich pork flavor and creating thickness. In rural communities throughout the South, backbone and dumplings meant Christmas thrift elevated to tradition. Families gathered around steaming pots, spooning dumplings and tender pork into bowls. This wasn't fancy food, but it was deeply satisfying, the kind of meal that warmed you from inside while snow fell outside. The dumplings were tender and rich, the pork sweet and falling apart soft. This represented mountain Christmas, making celebration from what you had, turning necessity into tradition passed through generations. Plum pudding with hard sauce was the dramatic finale to Victorian and early American Christmas dinners, a dessert demanding weeks of preparation that arrived flaming with brandy. Despite the name, no plums appeared. The term referred to dried fruits like raisins, currants, and candied peel studding the dense, steamed cake. Suet provided richness, breadcrumbs gave structure, and eggs bound everything with brown sugar, spices, and enough spirits to preserve the pudding for months. The mixture was packed into cloth-lined molds and steamed for hours, then stored until Christmas, when it was steamed again. The hard sauce, butter whipped with powdered sugar, vanilla, and brandy until fluffy, melted over the warm pudding, creating pools of sweetness. The serving moment was theatrical, with blue flames dancing across the surface as brandy was ignited. Families gathered in wonder, watching fire burn off before slicing into the dark, fragrant dessert that connected them to centuries of tradition. Vinegar pie filled the dessert spot on Christmas tables when eggs were scarce and lemons impossibly expensive, its tangy sweetness fooling children who never suspected the humble ingredient list. The filling required only sugar, flour, butter, water, and a splash of vinegar that provided the tartness usually contributed by citrus. Cooked slowly until thickened, the mixture was poured into pastry shells and baked until set, emerging with a custardy texture that rivaled proper lemon pie. The vinegar's sharpness mellowed during baking, leaving only pleasant tang that balanced the sweetness. Mothers guarded the recipe's secret, knowing children would reject dessert made with vinegar if they knew. The pie cost mere pennies, yet delivered satisfaction equal to fancy bakery creations. Vinegar pie represented Depression-era ingenuity, proof that chemistry and creativity could overcome poverty's limitations. Families served it proudly, creating Christmas memories that had nothing to do with expensive ingredients. Creamed spinach was the emerald green side dish that proved vegetables could be just as indulgent as any main course, its velvety texture and subtle flavor pleasing even spinach skeptics. Fresh spinach was washed thoroughly, wilted in butter, then combined with a rich bechamel sauce flavored with nutmeg and sometimes a touch of garlic. The finished dish was deep green and creamy, each bite smooth and satisfying. Steakhouses made creamed spinach famous, but home cooks recreated it for Christmas dinners when only the finest sides would do. The dish required fresh spinach. Frozen wouldn't achieve the same texture. And careful attention to the sauce. Families served it in small portions, understanding its richness. Creamed spinach represented the era's appreciation for technique over convenience, when vegetable dishes were crafted rather than simply steamed. It has largely disappeared from home cooking, surviving mainly in upscale restaurants. Fried rabbit sausage with buttermilk biscuits was Christmas breakfast that turned wild game into something special enough for holiday morning. Mountain families ground rabbit meat with pork fat, sage, black pepper, and salt, forming patties that fried crispy in cast iron. The sausage was lean from rabbit but rich from pork fat, creating perfect balance. Served alongside buttermilk biscuits, split and buttered, this was breakfast that required hunting skill and butchering knowledge. In Appalachian communities, Christmas morning meant rabbit sausage sizzling while biscuits baked, filling houses with savory smells. Children woke to this aroma, understanding Christmas began with food earned through work. The sausage was tender inside with crackling crust outside, its sage flavor marking it as celebration food. This represented mountain Christmas, wild game transformed into tradition, poverty turned into pride through skill and resourcefulness. Congealed cranberry salad was the jewel-toned centerpiece of holiday tables, a shimmering mold that turned canned cranberries into something worthy of celebration. Homemakers dissolved cherry gelatin in boiling water, then folded in whole cranberry sauce with chopped celery, walnuts, and crushed pineapple for texture. The mixture was poured into decorative ring molds, then chilled overnight until firm enough to unmold onto crisp lettuce leaves. The result was stunning. Deep ruby red with visible chunks of fruit and nuts suspended throughout like edible stained glass. Children watched in amazement as the wobbly creation held its shape on serving platters. The tartness of cranberries balanced the sweetness of gelatin, while celery provided unexpected crunch. This dish required planning and patience, qualities that defined holiday cooking before instant everything arrived. Today, it has largely vanished from Christmas spreads, replaced by simpler preparations that lack the artistry of waiting for that perfect gelatin set. Which forgotten Christmas dinner would you bring back to your holiday table? Share your family's lost recipe in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe so we can keep these holiday traditions alive for the next generation.